And I think we're live. And we are. Here we go. Except I'm switching cameras. There we are. Inshallah and Ashe. Blessings to you, my energetic beings. It's as usual, it's the Sunday BLOCKbuster Show. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. As especially if you'd like to know or to be on my coffee show or meet me for coffee, just let me know. But today, my blockbuster guest is Gerald Savage. He's actually been on my Meet Me for Coffee. He has a unique and innovative sound pill. That is one word. You can find him at soundpill.net. But today I want to explore what exactly is a sound pill. It's actually really innovative, and for me, it was curious, and I still am inspired by it because it's taking pharmacology into the energies of sound, music, and frequencies in like an innovative way. And I truly believe energy is the medicine of the future. So, with that, let me introduce Gerald Savage, the founder and also the director of Sound Pill. And here we have my good
Hey,
friend Gerald.
thank you for having me
Oh,
today.
where's
It's
he?
great to be here.
Yes,
I'm here.
absolutely. So I want to explore what sound pill is, what that looks like and whatnot. Um, can you just share? I mean, like, first of all, good morning and welcome, and thank you for being here. I know it's not morning for you, but it's noon. But you promote sound pill kind of as a way to assist people. Can you kind of explore what sound pill even is?
Yeah, Songfield both takes assessment, meaning that we have all of these energies that are swirling around us, in us, about us, and they directly affect our state of being, our well balance. And therefore, sound and music, which, by the way, and we'll get deeper into it later, sound and music are just aspects of the expression of frequencies and how they can be used to both assess the energetic makeup of an individual as well as how to bring the balance to that individual. So that, in essence, is what Sound Pill is all about. I do a voice analysis assessment. Then we see what the energetic imbalances are, and taking those, then we see about how to address those so that we can bring everything back into balance. Because essentially, what you have when you're talking about sound vibration frequencies, this kind of thing, you will have the resonant frequency of something, meaning that that's the frequency at which something operates at its optimum level function. And then you will have entrainment, which if something is not operating at that optimum function, then we bring that back into balance through various modalities and means. And then the third thing is, of course, synchronization. Once we get that back into a balance, then we have the homeostasis. So that's essentially what I do. And there are various modes and means by which we address energetic imbalances. But we get the picture first, and then after the picture, which is very, very accurate, then we go about the process of trying to bring everything back into balance.
So, I mean, how are so because like I know our bodies all create different frequencies, energies, and vibrations. They're all unique to each and every one of us. So how is this expressed through music and sound? How is this created?
Oh, very interesting. So the here, and I don't know, I'm not going to take it to my website per se, but people can actually go to the website. And once they go to the website, they will see that there is a graph. And that graph bar, which is called a voice print, will have 12 different keys, if you will. If those people who are piano players, this will be the white and black keys. Okay. And each one of those is expressed through the pitch, say, for instance, C or C sharp or D, D sharp, and so on and so forth. Each one of those corresponds to a different part of the body. And also, each one of those bars corresponds to emotional aspects that correspond with each one of those areas. And so that's how it's expressed through the actual program of the voice file, which is a little different, I guess I should say, from what people may be used to in terms of the Vedic system of the chakras. That you have C corresponding to the root chakra, you have D corresponding to the second chakra, and so on and so forth. This is different because if you really look at the human being, and I like to speak in terms of the human being and not necessarily the human body, because the human body is just the most dense expression of who we are. If we talk on a higher level, we talk about the emotional aspects, the mental aspects, the etheric, the spiritual, the causal body, and so on and so forth. And those, of course, are higher aspects of who the human being is. But the most dense aspect is what we are dealing with on the physical level. So that's what we're really dealing with now. As to how things get out of balance, that can be the result of lifestyle choices. And lifestyle choices don't necessarily mean diet, what you eat, drink, and you get out into nature. It has a lot to do with it, and it's very important. But when we talk about areas of trauma, whether those are individual traumas that people go through, or whether it's family inherited trauma, or it's sometimes, quite honestly, it can be structural in nature. Sometimes we just honestly might just be out of balance. Our skeletal system might be out of balance. So,
Uh-huh.
these are all things that contribute to a person being out of balance when you're looking at a voice print.
So, I mean, I love frequencies and energies, but what other ways are these frequencies expressed? Like I get nature carries its own sound harmonic. A river does, the sky, the clouds, etc., etc. Even, animals, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of went into that as well, but can you kind of explain a little different the terms, like you use the terms resonance, entrainment, synchronization? Um,
Yeah, yes, yes. Matter of fact, can I share my screen for a
you
moment here?
sure
And I
can.
think
Let
that
me
I
go
can.
right there. Okay.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so let's just go through some fundamental terminology and understanding of what this terminology or these different words mean. Uh, this vibratory information, which you just alluded to, is measured as frequency, the number of cycles per second that the substance vibrates. The technical name for frequency measurement is hertz. And what that means is number of cycles per second. Every substance on earth, every bone, muscle, organ, vitamin, mineral, enzyme, and microbe has its own resonant frequency. Okay, once again, resonance is that uh, vibrational energy in which something operates at its most optimum. Okay, every human molecule has a particular corresponding musical frequency, and the masses of particles behave and maneuver among themselves as if they were musical notes on the chromatic scale. What the chromatic scale is, just once again, I'll go back to what I was speaking about in a moment ago, and that is the black and white keys. So the white keys sound like this. I'm playing off to the side here. And then the chromatic. Okay, so each one of those is the closest distance to one another. So that's what's called chromatic scale. Okay, so when you actually have the voice print, it will show different bars and graphs for the chromatic scale for each one of those pitches. Okay, so here are what you once again talking about resonance. Anything that is vibrating its optimum, most natural frequency. Entrainment, changing the vibration or frequency to match the frequency of an external source. So this can be done by stimulating, breaking up energy, or calming energy. All of those, once again, bringing back to balance through another means that energy, that resonant frequency that might be out of balance. And the synchronization is multiple sources vibrating at the same frequency in one accord. And that even, we say that in our language when we talk about relationships, and not just romantic relationships, friendships, or people that we commune with. And we say, I really vibe with that person. We seem to really be on one accord. We seem to really gel. And what we're talking about is energetically, because it's not just the way that person looks that helps you to vibrate at the same frequency and synchronization. When we sing together, when we have a nice conversation together, obviously, if we're being romantic, we are resonating. once again at one accord in the same frequency.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yes, so the next thing I will talk about is the breath, even in terms of the breath being a sound event. And what do I mean by that? If a person breathes, for instance, and they just cover their ears for a couple of seconds. And people, your audience can do that right now. Just for a couple of seconds, cover your ears and listen to your breath. And you will hear quite loudly what we would call like a white noise. No, what is white noise? White noise is something that contains all frequencies. The wind blowing, waterfalls. That's why we have this affinity towards water, the rain when it's raining. That holds all frequencies. It's not focusing on one particular frequency. And this is why when even people, for instance, can't sleep well and there's a lot of noise, they will put on a fan, and that fan will kind of absorb whatever that other sound is. Why? Because all frequencies are contained in that. So I like to always talk about starting at home. Now we all know Om and we know home, and Om is that energy, that vibration of the universe from which all people come from and all people return, as they say in the East. Okay, so the breath is very, very important in terms of looking at that as well. And Tonya, whenever you want me to stop and you have any questions, please feel free to do so, so that if there's any clarity that's needed about something, you can let me know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think people need to know more about this, like just exactly what you said, covering your ears and
Hmm.
listening, like that's just, that shifts your awareness just right there, one simple thing that people can do. Are there any
Yes.
harmful ways that these frequencies that have been used? I mean, I think energy, like anything, there's a duality, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. And first of all, I want to say, in terms of the external sounds, which, to answer your question, I think this will illustrate exactly the answer to your question. And that is, we all have, first of all, an external voice and an internal voice. So we speak, and when we speak, we are actually expressing not only our thoughts, we're expressing our emotions, we're expressing our being. And when I say being, because we have to remember that we're human beings and not human doings.
Right.
So even sometimes when people are trying to, let's say, deceive, and people deceive a lot through words, and you can hear that if you're listening very carefully, but even more so, you can feel that as it's coming through an individual. This is why you have a person who sings and they just sing notes and you can hear them sing and it's okay. And then there are those other people who sing and they touch your heart. And so, to answer your question, the harmful ways is if you turn all of that I just talked about, you turn that around and think about how people use speech, how people express through anger, the yelling and screaming. Now, of course, that affects not only you who's the receiver of that, but it also affects the person who's the generator of that. There's a book, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, and a lot of your viewers are, and that's the Hidden Messages in Water, in which there were experiments that were done regarding words and how these crystals would be formed. So it would take the water, and then based on what was imposed on that water, even verbally or mentally, and in terms of even music, and then he would freeze those crystals and you would see the outcome of the crystals. So, expressing things of love and kindness would be these beautiful crystals. And then, I hate you, I want to kill you. The crystals weren't even formed. They were very distorted, dark in color, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the ways, through our thoughts, through our hearts, and how we generate sound through those means. And then, of course, we also know that decibels, listening to music, frequencies too loudly will damage our hearing. And then we also know that there are now uses of frequencies, and some people even say with the rollout of 5G and electromagnetic frequencies, and that people's health is being adversely affected from the outside. So there are certain ways that frequencies can be damaging to an individual from their own doing, their own generation of not generation, but generating of their thoughts, of their emotions, their intentions, and then you would have something imposed on you from the outside, meaning that you would have electromagnetic frequencies and 5G and so forth. And there's a couple of other ways now which people may not necessarily think about, and that is in terms of the quality of food that you eat. Whether it's processed or whether it's alive, whether it's organic or whether it's genetically modified. That changes the vibrational frequency of what you're putting into your body. And of course, we talked about water and in terms of the content of the water. So this whole idea of frequencies and how it can be used to one's advantage in a mindful way or a destructive way, it goes way beyond, and I alluded to this when I first started, it goes way beyond this aspect of sound and music, which are just two expressions. And actually, they're globally under the same area of sound. Music is a form of sound, and sound, of course, emits music. You can see it that way, but it goes way beyond that. It goes to the way we think, the way we act, behave, our connection to nature, what we consume, that becomes a part of us. Because remember, whatever it is that we consume, and consuming means listening to music, consuming means eating certain types of foods, consuming means thoughts that you take in and you hold on to. We were talking earlier about people in the news, listening to bad news that's never going to give them anything positive. Vibrationally, your emotion will go operate at a lower frequency the more that you contain all of this hopelessness and darkness that exists in the world, which you can't change at all. But you definitely have the power within yourself to make a shift and change, or make a decision about what you want to take in and consume or not. And information is very important as well. And I could go on and on and on. I hope that answers your question.
So I'm curious, have you used frequencies like to shift like the soul to bring about balance, like in the inner world, the soul level? Have you done that?
Well, here's what I would definitely say about that. Let me go through a couple of things here, and I'll get to that one. Okay, so the barometer of the breath is very, very important.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Okay, so
There we go.
what's that?
I was just getting
You
me
got
off
it?
this screen so they could see you in the slides.
Oh, okay. So all I'm seeing is the PowerPoint. So I'm not seeing myself. I'm not necessarily.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay.
I'm handling the
Okay. There
back
I
end. You just flow.
am. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I have enough to do here. Okay. So the barometer of breath, the rhythm, quality, and depth of our breath reflects our mental and emotional states. So partially to answer your question is through the breath, because the breath will reflect when you think about a person who is excited, a person who is in anxiety, a person who's depressed, as well as a person who's calm and balanced. You will see that reflection. So the breath is a very powerful tool to be able to, remember I said we start with home, om. We start with the breath because the breath is the expression of life within the human being. And it's not just for changing the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, it's for bringing about balance. So the breath is the most fundamental connection that we have to the external world as well as to the higher internal spiritual world. I mean, people don't think about that. So if you think now we are long distance from one another, but the breath that I breathe and breathe out and in is connected to the same breath that you're breathing in and out. So that's the oneness that's contained. Now, if we are in this pool of life and we know that there's a lot of dark energy, we know that there are people out of balance. We know that people are operating at a low frequency. We know that people are spiritually disconnected. Then we have to be the balance of that. And we have to do our part. And this is where it becomes a team effort, if you will, that we all need to make sure that we are maintaining homeostasis and we are obtaining a high vibrational state so that we contribute, even through the breath, to some balance in this world. And, I have something there on the mechanics of breathing. I won't go through that. Through you have the normal exhalation, intercostal breathing. Those are the muscles that expand the rib cage, the diaphragm, which pulls in and pushes out air. Now, this is what I want to say. Once again, this is still answering your question about how we can use. And by the way, you mentioned me and how I use, but these are tools that people can use on their own. And this is what a big part of what I teach people and help people with is how to empower themselves through sound, vibration, frequency. Because a lot of people don't know how to do that. And this is nothing of their fault, because if you think about the world in which we live, where are you going to learn this? Unless there's something within you that says, I'm really wondering about that. And of course, we know as we ask, we receive, our answers are given to us. So we have to have that fundamental desire to want to know more. But where my job comes in is people who may have asked that question, and now it's through these means that they can get an answer. So although inhalation and exhalation are of utmost important, what occurs during the exhalation makes a difference in supporting or hindering health and wellness. As with all of our actions, our intention, mindset, and state of heart is most important. Full exhalation, not just from the standpoint of getting out all of the bad stuff, but getting rid of all of the emotional stuff as well. Okay, so we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is that excited part. We need to get the energy going, and then we have the calming, the parasympathetic. Okay, so full exhalation, the words we speak. Remember, I referred a moment ago to secret hidden messages in water. Our words are very important. The thoughts we hold behind those words, and I would also add to that the emotions that we hold behind those words, the prayer that we pray, the mantra or chant we utter, all of those things are the result of our exhalation. So we just think about exhalation in terms of breathing out, but every time we speak is an exhalation. Every time we pray, it's an exhalation. Every time we do a mantra or chant, that occurs during an exhalation. Very powerful stuff. It's not really very simple, but we never think along those terms. We think inhalation and exhalation is just a breath event, a breathing event, but it's really also what we say. And even when we are not saying anything, the fact that we hold certain emotions, that certain thoughts, certain energies, when we breathe out, that's what we're going back to what I was saying a moment ago. This is what we're bringing into the world, into the universe, I would say. Frequencies used through the breath, voice, and through the mouth, emotions. These are all things that come out of what I just mentioned a moment ago. Okay, we also have singing that we add here, humming that we add here. These are all powerful tools to bring you back into balance and meditative in nature, which once again, to answer your question, brings us back to our spiritual being. This is what meditation does. And by the way, I have sound meditations that I teach people as well. And once you have a means by which to get back to your source, your spiritual nature, these are really easy tools to use that people can do that. There are many times when I'm feeling something, wherever that's coming from, I'm out of balance. And just through meditation, through a sound meditation, through different practices, I forget what that feeling was. And that feeling is a lower vibration. So if you are operating and using tools of a high vibrational nature, all of those things go away. They're easy to get rid of, but the hardest part is to remember to do them. When people are in a funk, if you will, they get in that funk and it's like they can't hear or see anything. It's like, oh my gosh, I really don't feel like doing that, really. I'll go have something to drink instead. But you can actually use these different means by which to use the voice and the breath in a very intoxicating way, in a very higher intoxicating way, in a very beautiful intoxicating way. Okay. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Tonya?
I'm agreeing absolutely. I started doing new and full moon meditations, and I bring in the
Mm-hmm.
element of the day, like depending on I use the Chinese medicine kind of the month, day, year, hour. But I do the day.
Mm-hmm.
I bring in the seed sound, the chakra. I utilize the planets in astrology, the season of the elements. So, like being in the season of Cancer, the moon itself and feelings and emotions are like they're at their highest frequency to dissipate emotional energy because we're in the season of the
Yes.
moon in a way, right?
That's true. That's a very good point. A very, very good point. Yeah, so people, once again, and you mentioned things, the whole Chinese system, the water, the metal, the wood, and so on and so forth. And then you also mentioned the sign of Cancer, which we are in now, and how that's connected. The ruling planet is the moon, and then we talk about the emotions and how they're heightened. And so we have to have tools to override the physical, because these are physical phenomenons that actually express energy through them. Whether they're being the planet, whether they're being the elements in the water, so on and so forth. So that's our task, is to balance the human being once again. And going back to what I said earlier, that yes, we have this dense nature which we contain all of these feelings and these emotions. However, we also recognize behind all of that is this higher place of repose and of peace and of love and of light and so on and so forth. So I'm happy that you mentioned that, because what you have to do, and by the way, you mentioned even being connected to the Chinese system. I think this is important for people to recognize that you have to find your own groove. You have to find what works with you. So one size does not fit all. It really doesn't. Even when I'm using sound and music, not everybody's going to be into classical music. Not everybody's going to be into reggae. Not everybody's going to be into soundscapes. You're going to have different approaches, and we live in a time period where we can tap into so much on a global scale, you know, that at one time you probably had to live among the Chinese to be a part of that system, or you had to be in India to uh, to experience those modalities up close. However, none of that is necessary anymore. We can tap into whatever feels good to us, what works for us, where we feel the most at home, if you will. Excuse me. Okay, so this once again is the breath and the voice. They are the most powerful tools that you have. Notice on the right hand side, external and internal speaking. Think about the messages that we say of a vibrational nature. I'm ugly. I'll never be good enough. No matter what I do, I'm going to fail. And we actually say these things to ourselves internally. But then on another level, we can listen to music externally and we can actually hear that music internally. And there's a whole level of practices that I teach in terms of internalizing everything from intervals, which intervals are basically two notes. So that's a fifth, for instance, or an octave, or this. And these are very powerful intervals that people can use to actually, and people who, for instance, are into crystal bowls and tuning forks and that kind of thing, you can use those in those modalities as well. And of course, we have the internal, external singing, pranayama, which those people who are not familiar is, using the breath in a very energizing way of bringing balance, releasing energy from pain and stress in the upper left hand corner. Humming is very powerful because when you hum, mm, that's a sound that especially resonates throughout the entire body. Okay, so if you combine humming with intervals that I just played, for instance, it's just a step. Okay, praying, of course, I mentioned that earlier. Singing influences our health. What I would like people to do, just take a couple of seconds and just sit up tall and straight and just breathe normally. And the fact that you are being conscious and aware about breathing makes a difference, because what you're doing now is you are bringing your consciousness and awareness, your being, to the breath. See, that's a different thing as opposed to making it a mechanical exercise. Mechanical is that we always are breathing. We never think about it. We just assume that's what we do simply because it's what keeps us alive. But if you bring awareness to the breath, even in the simplest way, it will shift everything. So just simply breathe naturally and deep, calm, just natural. And then what I want you to do is to take the breath and make it audible, meaning that you can, this is a quiet breath, unless you're congested. Then it becomes a little bit louder. But if I do this, that immediately should shift things for you. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the sound quality is over online, as we're using this platform, but I think you get it if you can hear my external breathing, my breath out better than probably can you hear. And I don't want you to do this. I don't want that. Just audible, but keep it open. And when you do that, there's no way, if you are even stressed out, that you can stay stressed out. You just can't do it. And try that, test yourself on that. See if I'm telling the truth or not. I pretty much guarantee you that if you're stressed out, having anxiety, if you simply do that exercise, you can't sustain the anxiety. It doesn't, how should I say, sit in the same chair, right? It really doesn't. Okay, this is a really good exercise, and you can, by the way, you can get this PowerPoint on my website if you would like to order it as a PDF. It's a PDF file. There's a lot of good stuff here, and very basic tools that you can use. Soundpill.net. However, this is where we get Tonya a little bit more into aspects outside of music and sound and frequencies. They're not just heard; they are felt and sensed. Okay, when you're around a person who you vibe with or you don't vibe with, or you are remorse by, or you have an affinity towards, you can feel their energy. You don't need to use your hands. You don't even need to use your skin or any of your five lower senses. And by the way, we have higher senses as well. Is that we don't need those senses to be able to feel one's vibration, one's frequency. We can feel it. And sometimes because we get caught between what we like and what we see, so for instance, a man sees a beautiful woman who is very pleasing to his eyes, but yet that's only the surface. And then, of course, as that man gets to know that woman, or whomever it may be, a woman and then a man, is that you begin to feel their energy, but then there's a conflict because he's so handsome, she's so beautiful. There becomes this internal conflict about, well, maybe I should not engage with this person just simply because they look a certain way. And I'm getting all of these messages and signals. And then that ego within us says, yeah, but she's beautiful. He's handsome. Oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? So you sense and feel people and not just see them. And we have the Schumann resonance on the planet. It's 7.83 hertz. Remember, hertz is cycles per second, waveforms. We have sounds of nature, very powerful. I had mentioned earlier about waterfalls, birds chirping, crickets, a summer night, a fall day with the leaves being blown off the trees, a whale, a dolphin, all of these things. And here's even the fact that frequencies are at the cellular level. This actually was on NPR. National Public Radio, in which they explored research being done at the cellular level, that cells actually sing, they actually vibrate, they actually produce a sound. And when this particular researcher introduced alcohol to that yeast cell, it screamed. It didn't like it at all. And it's really wild when you think about we are made up of not just yeast cells. And of course, there are some of us do have yeast cells and want to balance that. And by the way, the program I used actually looks at that. That's an aspect of what it looks at. I want to go back here for 1 second. This is something that's on this particular, here, let's see if maybe you can hear this. This is the sound of a cricket slowed down. This is pretty amazing. So it sounds like the heavenly choir. It's
Yeah.
pretty crazy, when you
Yeah.
think that on our level. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Tonya. Go ahead.
No, I actually was just
Were you gonna say something?
I just not a cricket, but I listened to another animal who's they'd slowed down it was a bird, I think. I'm not sure what kind, but and it kind of was this same kind of thing. Like,
Wow, it's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, so the thing is that some things move in a motion. When I say a motion, which by the way, that's what frequencies are. They're just basically vibrations that move through life. That's what they are, either in a material way or electromagnetic way or conscious way or whatever. But when you slow them down, or you think about the planets, you think about the rotation of the movement in our solar system. There's actually people who are able to take those movements and mathematically calculate them so that it equals a particular pitch, frequency, which is very, very fascinating work. So this is the same kind of thing that you hear the cricket on one level, like rhythm. If you hear the cricket in the high, normal, periodic way that you hear cricket, and then you slow it down and you hear what's really happening on a deeper level, which of course a cricket to another cricket, they probably can hear that. It's not an issue at all. So it's just slowing down the rhythm of it as well. And there are always different levels to rhythm. So like if I clap and I go, that's just one level of rhythm. And then if I go, boom, 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 that's another level. And then I take it to another level. Boom, 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 boom. Take it to another level. It becomes boom, 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 boom. Then I take it to another level. So you hear all those different levels from the basic level, and this is the same thing that's happening really with the cricket. You're just hearing that sound before it actually is reduced to a slower, not necessarily tempo, but I guess some people would see it that way, but slowing down so you can hear the intervals clear between the different chirps and what happens every time that occurs.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. And I mean, it's so true, but so cool.
Yes. So here are other expressions of frequencies. Essential oils have frequencies. Colors, obviously, those people who are artists know that colors have waveforms and vibration and frequencies. And then, plants have particular frequencies. That is if you're eating food that's in its purest form, as opposed to, let's take a potato. Now, rarely do I know anybody who eats potatoes raw, but then, for the sake of the discussion, let's just say a person eats a raw potato. And I don't think it would kill anybody to eat a raw potato, but it's just not something that most people do. And I don't know anybody that eats raw potatoes. But anyway, and then the next level is you cook the potato. Whether let's say you boil it, you just put it in water and you boil it. So you're going to get a certain aspect of life through the water that you boil it with. And then you have frying it, and depending on, the heat of the oil, there are certain oils that become rancid at a certain temperature, or they become rancid if you let them sit too long, okay? Not using fresh oil. How many people actually make their own olive oil? How many people make their own sesame oil? I don't know many people that do that. But nevertheless, you take that, and then you take a potato chip. Okay, now you take the potato in its original form and you think vibrationally the frequency of a raw potato as opposed to a frequency of a potato chip, which has basically been stripped of life. And then depending on the company, well, we also have to talk about the way the potato was grown. If it was grown with Roundup and, glyphosate and, all these kind of things, it's going to damage the natural essence of that particular plant. So let's just say, it could be even organic. Let's just, for sake of the discussion, let's say organic. But that organic potato that is raw is going to have a whole different vibrational nature and outcome when compared to a potato chip, which is basically dead. There's no life. There's very little. There's life in everything. But if you want to talk about frequency and vibration, that vibration of the potato chip compared to the raw potato is very, very low, very low. You have in Ayurveda, for instance, out of India, considered to be the oldest medical practice on the planet, over, I believe, 5,000 years old or something like that. You have states of things, not just plants, but you can also talk about in terms of food being sattvic is very pure, rajasic is when the food is in a changing state, and then what's the third one? Tamasic. So then tamasic is basically, dead. And of course, when you're talking about things that are dead, they're making a transition into new life, because energy doesn't dissipate, it just recreates in another space and time. That comes from an Earth, Wind, and Fire song, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. That's a great, I think it's that Fantasy? I think the name of the song is Fantasy. Okay, and then notice in the middle of the page, okay, we have gemstones and we have scents. Flower essences, gemstones. A lot of people do use gemstones, which have a vibratory energy, a frequency that emits through gemstones as well. And then the combinations we'll just put in the middle there, just as an example, uncooked food of a particular color. Remember, we talked about colors, that is aromatic. Okay, so those are three different areas of how vibration and frequencies can be combined in a particular event of eating, for instance.
Right?
Yes, so the Stevie Wonder Overjoyed, I just have that as a song that uses nature sounds in the song itself. And I talked about the frequencies of essential oils, and these are different examples of oils. This comes out of the program that I do and the practice that I do, and actually how I will suggest that people use. And by the way, I have to say I'm not a medical doctor, so I have to use terminology such as suggest and not diagnose and prescribe and blah, blah, blah. So that's important. I have to do my due diligence and let everybody know that. But anyway, once you do the voice print, essential oils are a part of frequencies and helping to bring balance to the lower of the frequencies. And then, of course, we have a gentleman by the name of Bruce Tanio actually measure the frequencies of all kinds of foods and also the human body. You can look up more on that research. And then you actually have nutrients and toxins. This goes back to your question earlier, Tonya, when you were talking about how things can cause harm. So look at, for instance, arsenic, a form of arsenic, and you see the frequency of arsenic. And so using that particular frequency can be very harming.
Oh, wow.
And this is why it's very, very important. And I have a whole database of these frequencies. Not every frequencies, but I've had people who were taking certain medications, and you can see when you looked into the database, wow, this person is taking this for their stomach and it's damaging their hearts, you know? And what's very interesting about that is how, and this is kind of a side note, I don't know if people thought about it or not, when you think about medications and people talk about, well, you know, these are the side effects. I don't know whoever came up with that slick term. You know, it's a very slick term, side effect. No, 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 it's a direct effect. It's not a side effect, it's a direct effect. You know, it's that you are addressing one thing and you're causing harm to another. That's what it is. Let's be real about this. You know, as opposed to, well, you know, I'm concerned about the side effects, and they give you this long thing in terms of the medications. And I'm not telling people not to take medications, because some people, you know, they depend on the medications. But at the same time, let's be real about what you're doing. And if in fact you're making that choice, make sure that you know everything about it to be able to make a true, do your due diligence so that you know what's going on. And it's the most important thing that you can do. And I think, Tonya, this is what we're really talking about, is we're talking about, this is the most important thing that there is, and that is to take care of yourself. That's really what it comes down to. There's nothing more important than that. And it doesn't mean that you're selfish because you're taking care of yourself. You know, if you want to see it selfish, but see it as a positive selfish, as opposed to, well, I'm taking care of myself and I should be guilty about it because other people are not taking care of themselves. And I'm so privileged, and you start criticizing yourself, that inner voice once again. Okay. And of course, I have an amino acid there you can see as well. That should be 131.09. And that's in the area of C. This is something people can look up on their own, the superfood pyramid, in terms of, you can just Google this, and in terms of vibrationally, you know, what are the measurements of the frequencies that you find. So I guess what people are beginning to see, hopefully, is that we're talking about frequencies on every level, not just sound and music. Everything can be translated into a frequency that corresponds to a musical note, but everything has a vibrational energy that comes through. Everything, without exception. And this goes back to your question earlier, Tonya, in terms of assessing the highest vibratory frequencies. These are just a few. Love, the highest, the very highest. Joy, prayer, gratitude. And some of these will emit, essentially through these practices that are done very mindfully and consciously and intentionally, they will bring a higher vibration. Prayer, because when you are praying, what are you doing? You are generating energy within yourself towards another that's a part. Whatever that other is, can be a person, it can be an event, it can be a society, it can be a condition like the world in which we're living in now. Gratitude, peace, faith. Difference between faith and hope. Hope is, there's an aspect of it that doubts. Well, I hope it happens. That means it may not. And if it doesn't happen, that means it's God's will. I mean, that's how people operate. That's what goes on inside of people. That's a conversation. If I hope it, you know, and it doesn't happen, then that means that's the way it was supposed to be, which it takes the empowerment out of it. When you start thinking outside of yourself as it's not going to work because, now, of course, we know that we can't be self-centered and everything operates based on our wants and desires. Now, I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that there's a whole lot of power in faith and less power in hope, is what I am saying. Compassion. Once again, you're extending your energy to something outside of yourself, which generates this light and love and positivity that comes through you. Meditation. There are different kind of meditations. And it's not just about, you know, making yourself not think thoughts. I mean, that's not what meditation is about. You know, it's allowing the process of the universe to come through you at that moment, knowing that all is well. That's really, at the end of the day, that's really what meditation is. Because we are connecting not only to this world, we're connecting to the other world, whatever that other world is. I don't have all the answers to any of this, and I would be very arrogant to profess that. And I'm sorry, Tonya, is there anything, I know I'm doing a lot of talking, is there anything that you would like to ask me, or anything like that before I move on?
No, I mean, I think for my audience, I think frequency is a huge thing. I have a online kind of beginner course called The Balance of Being, and I talk about food, I talk about the breath, solitude.
Okay.
So it's I love that you're hitting on all those things that are actually I have, and it's really baby steps. It's like once you get your nutrition quotient raised, and then get your meditation, solitude, start loving your inner self. Like you said, those inner conversations that we have. I
Mhm.
like to, even the breath work, that's also part of it. But I always like to have people like do an inhale and do a hold for 3 breaths or so, and then the exhale even
Yes.
longer. But yeah, every body
Mhm.
carries its own inner frequency, vibration, the sound quality, like you just said,
Yes.
I remember my mom used to always groan. She would like, instead of sighing, she had like a groan. And that to me just kind
Interesting.
of alerted me to an element that was kind of restricted a little bit, or maybe she had excess deficiency. So I mean,
Mhm.
I love, like, the whole idea is, I think it's innovative, I think it's energetic, it's just fascinating. I mean, I'm in with you, like, woo, you're speaking my language is what I'm trying to say.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Wonderful. So I won't go. There's so much more. So I know that we don't have forever. So I will just kind of go through a lot of these briefly. And once again, people can go to my website, soundpill.net, and if they would like to get this, $20 for the whole. Um, I'll put it in PDF form as opposed to the PowerPoint. So, and once again, I'm glad you said that, Tonya. These are baby steps, but I think for people who are really looking to consolidate all of this knowledge in a useful, experiential way, I think is very important. So, people tend to think in segments of life. This segment of life, this segment of life, this segment of life, but realizing that all this needs to be brought together. You can't, how can I put this? You cannot ignore any part of this if you're on the path to wholeness, wellness. You can't. Everything is in, all of this is a part of it. It's a part of it all the time. And it's not something that is a part of the time. It's all the time. So brain waves, people talk a lot about brain waves, and these are the different levels of brain waves. And you can see that each one of the levels of brain waves actually has a frequency, and it has a corresponding aspect of life, whether you're in deep sleep or you're being creative or relaxing, you're concentrating, high performance, and this goes across the board, no matter what kind of work you do, no matter what your nature may be, which is a whole different thing. Now, these, of course, will shift depending on, once again, what we are being attentive to, what we're focusing on, what we're concentrating on, what we're being aware of. And this is why all of that ties into going back to who you're around, who's in your company, what is it that you watch, what do you listen to, what are the words that you speak, what are the emotions you're holding, how prayerful are you being, how doubtful are you being, how depressed are you, so on and so forth. All of these things are a part of that and are going to impact brain waves. And there are programs, let's see, I don't know if yeah, I'll go back here for a second. So there's a program. There's perhaps some of your followers have explored what's called Hemisync. That's actually the branded version of hemisync, hemi, hemispheric synchronization. There you go. Hemispheric synchronization. There's a company that actually out of the Monroe Institute that is called Hemisync, and basically it uses what are called binaural beats. What are binaural beats? Where you will have one frequency in one ear, another frequency that's slightly different than the first frequency. The brain will entrain, remember that term I talked about earlier on, it will entrain and average out those frequencies to create a third frequency that then corresponds to these brain waves. And so there are programs and different kind of programs. Sync is just one of the programs. It's actually one of the older programs. But now you have David Smart, and you have other programs like that you, once again, you can purchase these and actually work with them and bringing more high performance if you want to concentrate, learning, if you want to help you and train your brain to higher learning, creativity, and these kind of things. And these things really, really work. I mean, they work very, very well based on science. And that is what's going on. I say that term and then I think about the world and I just say, oh, believe the science, believe this. It depends on what science you want to listen to. But anyway, so these are things that are very powerful tools that people can use. And actually, you have some programs that are sound and light, meaning that you will, whatever it is you're listening to, you can actually embed it into music that you like to listen to. And then what you do is you will have the lights, which will be flickering. Of course, you don't keep your eyes open. These are done with glasses, with your certain kind of glasses with your eyes closed. And then the pulse of what you're hearing will be corresponding, coordinated with the lights that are flashing. Very powerful. And it's based on, the fact that you're tapping into the prefrontal lobe and the optic nerve and these kind of things. So there's very powerful tools that you have to do your due diligence once again if you want to explore this, especially with the sound and lights. I have programs that I work with just with the sound in terms of the brain entrainment, and that can be done long distance. So the work that I do can be done online. However, when you're talking about sound and light machines, that's not something that can be done long distance because you have to have the gear to be able to put on your ears and put over your eyes and so forth. There's also, this is a book, and some of you might be interested in about the frequencies that you find in the spine. This is from the work of Kay Gardner. She's one of the early sound healers in the modern time. Of course, we know the sound and music healing comes out of ancient cultures that use this on a daily basis. But when we're talking about this new round of with the technology and so on and so forth, that people are using sound and music, but they're also using other aspects to, once again, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. So you have colors in the first octave, if you look here, and then you have pitch correspondences, musical pitches, and then you have vowel sounds, the next layer out, and then you have spinal areas, next level out, and so on and so forth. You're transmitting colors, endocrine glands, gemstones, and then out here, you have all these various feelings that correspond. So you can see there's a whole lot of information there. But I think this kind of really wraps it up really nice in a package that shows you that vibrations, frequencies can be expressed through different means. And that's why I want to make it very clear in terms of the sound and music are just two, or if you want to look at it as one type of expression. Okay. Five layers of this is more just kind of break down the fact that you have frequency. Timbre is the quality of the sounds that you listen to, whether they're instruments or electronics. I explained earlier in terms of intervals, musical pitches that are a certain distance apart, and then we combine musical intervals with chords. So if we have this, and I put this in, I put that note in, all of a sudden it's a 3-note chord. If I put in this note, it becomes a 4-note chord, so on and so forth. Okay, and then of course energy is beyond the measurement of frequency. That's, if you want to call, the chi of life, the nous of life, that divine energy that goes beyond definition in terms of our mathematical approaches to all these various other areas. And the musical elements, speed, texture, scales, these are things that are on a more deeper level, more for the understanding, not necessarily for something that you would do, but things that I use in terms of my work. And then Kay Gardner, drones, these are once again higher level things. You have overtones, singing. What are overtones? Overtones is what I call the DNA of sound. Everything that makes a vibration has this construct, because we don't think about the fact that when I'm going to slow down my voice for a second as I'm speaking. When I'm speaking, notice I'm actually singing pitches. There are pitches that are coming out of my voice. Go back to cricket. That you heard one thing on one level. We slow down speech. We listen to that note right there. We hear these. So you can hear that what I'm doing, anything that produces a pitch, a frequency, our voices are constantly producing frequencies that we're not aware of because we're so focused on the communicative aspect of the voice. That is what the voice is saying. We're not paying attention to the frequencies. We're not paying attention to the expression of where those words are coming from energetically, so on and so forth. So this is a big part of what I do when I do the voice assessment. I won't. I'm trying to think I'll play this just for a second. I won't go very far into it. Because this shows you what's really happening as opposed to what we hear. Go back again.
Hello, I am Anna Maria, and I'm an overtone singer, and I'm going to tell you something about polyphonic singing today. Overtone is a voice technique where one person sings two notes at the same time.
Okay, so that's just a short demonstration. If you look here, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the DNA of sound. Every single person who speaks, every animal that howls and makes any kind of pitch, frequency, sound, without exception, has this structure. Everything. So you see this wide structure here, gets smaller as we get up to the higher notes, frequencies. And what she is doing is she's tapping into these individual frequencies, which we cannot hear. But there are certain people who do this type of practice who tap into those higher frequencies. It's amazing. It's the most amazing thing that I, on a daily basis, think about. It's amazing that everything in life that produces a frequency has exactly the same structure, without a doubt. It's amazing. I'm talking about instruments. I'm talking about people speaking. Doesn't matter who the voice is. People singing, animals that make noise, whales, dolphins, wolves, the crickets, every single thing has this structure. And there's something to that I haven't quite figured out yet. But it's really amazing that everything produces that same structure. Crazy. Okay, so that's what overtone singing is. You have that bottom note that she was singing. Which note is that? She's singing a C. And then what she's doing is she's singing these upper notes, which are there all the time, but you don't hear them unless you're able to extract them as she's doing. Okay. Okay, so those are just spiritual traditions about music and sound, culture, and function. Sound and music have always been a part of cultures, whether we're talking about the ancestors or we're talking about aspects of life, birth, death, marriage, harvest, praise, worship, rites of passage, whatever the case may be. And so I'll get to one other thing. Okay, I want to do this one. The sound of the holy, what I call, or the sound of the divine. This is pretty amazing. If you look at the sound ah, and what do we do at the end of a day? Ah, okay. But did you ever realize how that sound is embedded into so many names of the divine, or people who are highly considered to be the spiritual leaders of a religion. By the way, Tonya, let me know if you know I'm running over time and you need me to slow down or get finished or whatever. Please let me know, because I could do this all day.
No,
So,
actually, I think this is fascinating, this right here.
so if you look at all of these sounds, Krishna, twice, Brahma, Obatala, Jesus, Jehovah, Baha'u'llah, Oya, Chango, Muhammad, Kuan Yin, even the word God, the Maya, Yeshua, Yahweh, Shiva, Buddha, Allah. Now that is much more than coincidental. I mean, there's no way that's a coincidence.
Hang on here. We lost connection. Dun, 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 dun. Just a minute. Technology, huh? Choo, choo, choo. Just give me a minute. Playing around. Okay, well, for those of you that are interested about Soundpill or what it is, be sure to check out soundpill.net. I won't be going live next Sunday because it's the 4th of July. But however, I am still reorganizing my daily snippets with the elements, the affirmations, and all the centers and whatnot to be like a daily info center or whatever that looks like. And yeah, be sure to join me live during the week as well. And sorry about the interruption. Sometimes my internet has issues. Probably need to turn it off on some other areas or something in my house. Seems to be an issue. So with that, inshallah, Ashe, thanks for joining me. And hopefully maybe I can have Gerald back on later to finish up his amazingness. Thank you.